Ask it that, I remind you that Otto von Bismarck was the Chancellor of Prussia, and now he became the Chancellor of the German Empire. Okay? And last week we left off with him facing a problem. He used fire and blood in order to fashion a new European order by unifying Germany, okay? But he had a problem. See, he didn't really want to go back to the 18th century style of politics that, for example, Napoleon III was willing to play with. He understood that that would be problematic because he was scared that war would unleash liberalism and socialism within the country. Anybody remember by any chance what event during the Franco-Prussian War led him to have this fear? What had happened in France during the Franco-Prussian War? It was an important event. Marx said something about it. Karl Marx, guy with a huge beard, terrible father. This is not a quiz question, this is just someone to show me, okay? What event happened? You can speak. Yes, the Paris Commune. Yeah, the Paris Commune of 1871. Remember, France was defeated by the German states and Prussia, and the working class in Paris rose in a revolution and created the first socialist state, or at least left-wing in the sense of revolutionary redistribution state in the history of modern Europe. And Bismarck saw this and he said, I don't want this to happen in Prussia, because remember, Bismarck is not a progressive person. The only reason why he took control of German unification was to avoid something like that. So he needs to avoid war happening again in Europe. But his problem is he can't create the Vienna system. Why? Well, because everybody hates everyone. The French hate him because he took Alsace and Lorraine, and they're all going like, revanche, revanche, revanche. The Austrians are weak, divided. Remember, Austria has become a federation of two sovereign parts, the Empire of Austria and the Kingdom of Hungary. And they're hated by the Russians, who hate Austria. And the English, well, the English are in glorious isolation, building the empire where the sun never rests. So he can't create the kind of interest in managing international systems that Metternich created. So he has to get something that's second best. Now, because Bismarck is by himself, because there are no other politicians like Kasselrich or Talleyrand or even Alexander I of Russia present in politics, instead all of the great powers are ruled by people who are pretty much egoistic and hardcore realpolitik people. He has to build the system by himself. There's no one to work with. And he creates essentially a mixture of the 18th century system and the Vienna system. The elements of the Vienna system is consultation, okay? European politics continues using Congress diplomacy. The great powers, whenever there's a crisis, come together and they discuss it and they try to resolve it in a peaceful manner. He also tries to put back in the box of history the idea of compensation regimes. I remind you, compensation regimes is the idea that if one great power gains something somewhere, the other great powers have the right to ask for territorial compensation. And I remind you, Napoleon III brought this back when he said essentially that if Russia gains something in the East during the Crimean War crisis, France has to be compensated. That's pretty much all of Napoleon III's policies, essentially trying to find compensations. We all saw how that turned out. How did it turn out for Napoleon III? Anybody can tell me?
He couldn't handle the 18th century system
that
he created by himself.
Yeah, he sucked at the game. He lost. He went to exile. Funny story, his son, Prince Napoleon, dies in South Africa, either during the Boer War or in North Africa during the Mahdi Revolt. I can't remember. So the son of the Emperor of the French dies in a British colonial war, fighting for the British. Now, on the other hand, because he cannot persuade all of the great powers to come together into one alliance, like in the Vienna system, he has to rely on balancing alliances. And I remind you, this is a person who has a very particular way of trying to get his way done, which is not always going to work. Okay, his goals are the following. In Europe, he wants to keep France isolated. He assumes that France will always be an opponent of Germany and a threat. So he needs to keep France without any continental European great power ally. Secondly, in a repetition of Metternich's dilemma between Britain and Russia, remember, Prince Metternich always had to balance on the one hand Britain, on the other hand Russia. His whole policy was based on keeping both of these states committed to Austria. Okay? And when he left, his successors made the choice. They chose Britain, and then in the Crimean War and so on. Bismarck faces exactly the same situation, only this time he needs to balance between Austria and Russia. Okay? Third, he wants to persuade everybody that Germany is a satisfied state. Okay? That Germany is happy with how things are in Europe and it doesn't seek any changes in the European status quo. So, Bismarck is opposed to any popular push or governmental policy that would lead the European states to believe that Germany is seeking further changes in the status quo. Among these things, he is opposed to Germany getting any colonies. As we're going to see, we are now entering the high period of colonialism. You see, there's a small health invention in Europe called penicillin. And what penicillin does is makes Europeans able to survive in Africa. In the parts of Africa they couldn't survive before, which means that the interior of Africa spared direct colonization for so long, now is completely open to the Europeans. And what happens is in Germany, people start saying, well, now we have an empire, and now we're a great power. And what do great powers have? Colonies. So Germany should get colonies. Bismarck is like, what the devil do we need colonies for? We are a continental power. If we have to get colonies, it means we are going to piss off England or someone else. So no, no colonies. So he takes a very anti-colonial policy. Now, what is his solution to his security dilemma? Well, he tries to keep, like Metternich, both Austria and Russia happy, and he creates the Drei-Kaiser bond, the alliance of the three emperors, which unified Germany, Austria, and Russia. Okay? And this alliance is going to last from 1873 to 1887. Now, Bismarck is very lucky in one thing. His policy of keeping Russia and Austria happy, and we're going to see later on why that is extremely hard. But his policy of keeping Austria and Russia happy is helped a lot by the fact that the British are isolationist egoists, and that the Russians and the British are engaged in the great game. Okay? What's the great game? The great game is essentially one of the greatest imperialist struggles in Europe. And if you want to take a more romantic, adventurous look, Lawrence of Arabia style, okay, imperialist but romantic, it's one of the greatest spy adventures you can ever read about. For 50 years, Russia and Britain play a game, a deadly game by the way, of espionage and counter-espionage, diplomacy and counter-diplomacy, coup and counter-coup, war and counter-war throughout the whole area that starts from Lake Van and extends all the way to the Pacific. And the center of the game is Central Asia. Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Tibet. And what is going on is the British fear the Russians because they believe the Russians target India. And the Russians fear the British because they believe the British want to undermine the soft underbelly of the Russian Empire, which is the central state. So what happens is both of these states extend their influence and borders by violence and diplomacy until they get essentially squeeze out any buffer. A number of wars created by this great game is massive. Okay? The Third Anglo-Burmese War, the Second Anglo-Afghan War, the Russian wars with Central Asian Khanates, and the Russian wars on the Caucasus. Those of you who are Cherkesy, Circassians in descent, your ancestors were the victims of the Great Game. Okay? The Russian territorial expansion against China and the UK conquest of Egypt. And not only that, there is a great book in English called The Great Game, which actually follows the game through the lives of the poor young people who actually were the pawns, the spies of the Russian and the Imperial British government. So if you want to learn more about it, it's a big book, 600 pages, but it's great. So this Anglo-Russian antagonism permits Bismarck to present himself as the honest broker, the person who can mediate differences. Now, his problem is this too. The Eastern question, which has not gone away. Okay? And the Eastern question itself gets connected to the Great Game. Here's what the problem is. In the Ottoman Empire, last time we left it, there were great reforms happening. The Tanzimat reforms and so on. And while those reforms changed a lot in the empire, especially in Rumeli, the Balkans, a lot of the empire was still unreformed. The more east you went and the more south you went, the less the reform had an impact. And both the reforms and the lack of reform created an ahtarman, to use a Turkish word, a salad, a mix of problems. You had conservatives who were opposed to the reform program versus non-Muslim nationalists, Greeks, Bulgarians, and Armenians, being the most important of the nationalist groups, versus Muslim nationalists, the young Ottomans, and slowly forming the young Turk movement versus the Sultan. And in this era there is only one Sultan, and pretty much when you talk about Turkish modern history and you use the word the Sultan, you mean Abdul Hamid II. Okay, pretty much. Okay? Now, as we said, since the Crimean War, the Russian government had decided that since it cannot control the Ottoman Empire, remember the Crimean War was all over that, it will dissolve it. It will seek the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire. And it finds the opportunity in the year 1876. The year 1876 is a terrible year for Ottoman politics. Essentially, there's a succession crisis. There are 3 sultans overthrown and changed within 1 year. Abdulaziz is overthrown because of his expensive tastes, especially for the navy. He's replaced by his brother Murad V, who goes insane. By the way, Abdulaziz is murdered under weird circumstances. Murad V goes insane, so he is then replaced by another brother, Abdul Hamid II. Okay? In the same time that this succession political crisis is going on, in Bosnia, initially the Serbs, but also Muslim Bosnians, join in a massive revolution that has to do mostly with conscription rules and taxation rules. Until then, Bosnia had a special privileged position like many parts of the Ottoman Empire, but one of the ideas of reform is the empire will become homogeneous, the administrative system. So the Serbs rebelled because, well, they're Serbs, but this time also the Bosnian Muslims rebelled because they were scared of their Serbs, but they were also unhappy about conscription. Until then they were exempted from it, and taxation. And with the Serbian and the Bosnian revolution, the Bulgarians then rebelled in the Danube provinces. And all of the rebels are defeated. Montenegro and Serbia, which are autonomous states, also declare their independence from the Ottoman Empire and go to war with it, but they're also defeated. And these defeats lead to Russian interests. You see, Russia sees itself as the protector of the Slavs, and it declares war on the Ottoman Empire. And initially the Russians do very well. They quickly break through the Danube front. Romania declares its independence and declares war on the empire. The Serbs declare war again. So the empire is essentially attacked from everywhere. But in a city in Bulgaria at Pleven, Osman Pasha, one of the Ottoman generals, is able to hold the Russians back. Partly because the Russians are idiots, and instead of ignoring Pleven and moving on with the war, they decide, we're going to take the city. Never get obsessed about one city. Always keep the real goal in mind. And the real goal was Istanbul, Constantinople. Okay? But they get pissed off and they want to prove, so they end up sending 120,000 troops to spend a whole year besieging Osman Pasha's 30,000 troops at Pleven. You can visit Pleven, by the way. It's actually pretty cool. There's this huge panorama, which is this 360-degree painting. It's cheap. It is Bulgaria. They kind of don't like Turks. And not in the way Greeks don't like Turks. Like, really don't like Turks. But it's really cheap, and the alcohol is really cheap. So you should definitely go. But not the visa, unfortunately. Now, after bitter fighting, and after bringing in an engineer general who looks at the map and tells the Russian commanders, why are we letting this city still get food in Pleven? Let's take over this little village here. The Russians defeat the Ottomans. They reach San Stefano, Yeşilköy today, and they impose the Treaty of San Stefano on the Ottomans. Also in the west, they take Kars, Adrahan, and Batum. Austria, seeing the collapse of the Ottoman government and worried about the Serbian revolt in Bosnia, it's worried that essentially this revolt might influence its own area, and primarily the Hungarian part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire decide to occupy Bosnia and Herzegovina. This massive victory of the Russians at Stefano finally worries the British, who under the leadership of Benjamin Disraeli send their navy to the Bosphorus and threaten war. So it seems like we're going to have a second round of the Crimean War. That's where Bismarck steps in. He goes forward and he tells everybody, hey, let's not have a war, let's have a congress. I can be the honest broker to all of you. I have no interest in the Balkans. It's not worth the healthy bones of a Pomeranian grenadier. So all of you can come to Berlin, and I will give you beer and wine and champagne, and Bratwurst and Schnitzel, and we'll all have a good time. And he organized the Congress of Berlin, and it works greatly. But here's the problem. The Russians went to the Congress thinking that Bismarck would support their position and salvage most of the Treaty of San Stefano. But essentially what Bismarck did is he agreed with the English and they imposed on Russia the Treaty of Berlin. To have an idea about the war in Plevna, there's a great Russian movie called Turkish Gambit. It's pretty fun. Let's see, will it work? It doesn't work because I bet I have my sound closed. Yep. Yep. Yeah, life is hard. Life is too hard for a professor. So there we go. So this is the map of Europe after the Congress of Berlin. Germany is over here, hasn't gained any territory outside of the old German Federation. But importantly, let's look at the Ottoman Empire. Romania, de facto independent since the 1848, now becomes de jure independent as the Kingdom of Romania. The Kingdom of Serbia gains niche, this territory over here, and also becomes independent. Montenegro, which is just crazy in its history, but let's just say since the 1500s they've never really accepted Turkish rule, now also becomes recognized as independent. So whereas before you only had one independent Balkan state, Greece, now you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Greece gets Thessaly in return for not participating in the war. It's a war by the great powers for not joining the Russians. Over here, two new autonomous principalities are created. Bulgaria and Eastern Rumelia. Okay? Now, under the San Stefano Treaty, Bulgaria was all of this. Okay? And this is going to be something that Bulgarian nationalists focus on. They consider that the treaty denied them their rightful land. By the way, the Bulgarian autonomy is kind of like the Romanian autonomy. Bulgaria has its own army, can even have its own foreign relations. All that it has to do is pay some money to the poor. Here in the east, the Russians get these regions over here, okay? Batum, Kars, Adrahan. Britain takes Egypt, which technically is still under the suzerainty of the Sultan, as is essentially Libya and Algeria and Tunis, but is actually de facto now ruled by the British through the Khedive. They also get Cyprus. And over here, Bosnia-Herzegovina and the Sanjak are under the occupation of Austria-Hungary. Technically, they are still part of the Ottoman Empire, which creates a weird situation where you have Ottoman civil authorities and Austrian military authorities. Now, that's the situation in Europe, in Eastern Europe. Things are not that stable in Western Europe. There's no war. Well, there is war. In Spain, for the third time in 50 years, the Carlists are once again fighting the Third Carlist War, trying to get Don Carlos to become king of Spain and have a happy, conservative, ultra-religious, Inquisition-loving regime. They are defeated by the Isabelinos versus, well, this time it's the Republic plus Amadeus plus Alfonso Knights, whatever. They're defeated. And they give up finally. They're not going to try something like this for a period. In Portugal, there is increased political instability, while throughout Europe we have our first transnational terrorist organizations and campaign, anarchists. Throughout this era, the anarchists, really speaking, a loose association of individuals who all share some ideas, are engaged in assassinations, bombings, and attacks. Among the people they are able to kill, the Empress of Austria-Hungary, Elizabeth, Sisi, for those of you that might know about Sisi, a king, a president of France, a king of Italy, the Tsar of Russia, Alexander II, and quite a lot others. So there is this increasing fear of a transnational criminal political network, which by the way also shows an immigration, since in America anti-immigrant groups say that if Eastern Europeans and Italians are let into America, they're going to bring together with themselves diseases and terrorism. So, you know, some things never change, just the faces and the color of the people who are targeted. There are wars in the Balkans. Supposedly, the Berlin Congress resolved everything. It didn't. Serbia and Bulgaria fight a war. By the way, Bulgaria is an autonomous part of the Ottoman Empire and it's fighting a war on its own against Serbia. And Greece and the Ottoman Empire also fight a war, the 1897 war, which is also the last war won by an Ottoman Sultan. The problem also is that because of Austria's decision to expand in the Balkans, and because of extreme Hungarian worry about Romania, you see, the Kingdom of Hungary has a couple of minorities in it. The Hungarians themselves are probably 50 or 40% of the population. The rest are Croatians, Serbians, and Romanians. And kind of logically, the Romanians in Hungary start demanding their rights or thinking it would be good if we are part of the Romanian kingdom. So for the Hungarian part of the empire, the Balkans become extremely important. Well, Russia is a protector of the Slavs, so there is increasing competition between Austria and Russia in the Balkans, and by England and Russia. And in 1863, there's a major Polish revolt, okay? Poland, remember, had been divided in the 18th century by Catherine the Great, and then had been autonomous until Nicholas I became Tsar. Then it had lost its autonomy, so in 1863 the Poles revolted. They always choose the worst time to revolt. They can't coordinate with everybody else. They just do it by themselves because they're Poles, and yeah, whatever, we are independent, and they lose. And it's always terrible when they lose. But, you know, it's not all about Greeks and Turks anymore in the Balkans. This is a cute cartoon. This is Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. This is Greece. They're both smoking. The Ottomans are richer, they smoke cigars. The Greeks are poorer, so they smoke whatever the hell. And they're watching Austria and Russia, you know, competing with each other over the Adriatic. Let's go a bit to the rest of the world, okay? As I said, Bismarck doesn't care about getting colonies, but he likes to present himself as the indispensable person for Europe. And since the other European powers are busy doing stupid things like getting colonies, Bismarck wants to reinforce his position by helping them manage their issues. Now, let's see what's going on. In Asia, the European expansion into China continues. Especially French expansion into Siam, which is today Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, leads to a Franco-Chinese war where the Chinese actually don't do that badly. They are able to hold their own against the French to a point, and that leads to the fall of the government in France. But in the end, the French are able to overcome it, and they conquer all of Vietnam. At the same time, Japan, who, remember, a couple of weeks ago was forced to open into the world by the Americans and the British, now decides forcing other countries to become part of the world system seems to be the correct way to do civilization. So we shall show our civilized way by forcing the Koreans, who were even more isolationist than the Japanese, to open to the world. So they send their ships, they bombard a couple of Korean forts, and they tell the Korean kingdom, from now on we are going to guide you to civilization. Okay? In Africa, the European powers, especially England and the United Kingdom, and France, correction, United Kingdom and France, are clashing over control of the Congo region. This is doable thanks to the new medicine that permits those Europeans not to die like dogs whenever they go into the deserts. Well, actually it's not deserts there, it's jungles. The result is that the French and the English come very close to conflicts, and Bismarck helps mediate. You see, Bismarck has a theory. He doesn't want France to get strong in Europe, but all that energy that the French have, all that passion and anger, why don't you use it on non-European people? Go conquer some Africans, go conquer some Asians. So he actually supports French colonialism as a way to keep the French from talking about Alsace-Lorraine, Congo, Algeria, Alsace-Lorraine, Congo. Okay? And at the Conference of Berlin in 1889, okay, they divide Africa. And in the Conference of Berlin, one of the most disgusting examples of imperialism and capitalist exploitation happens when the King of Belgium, Leopold II, is given the whole of the modern Democratic Republic of Congo, not as a colony of Belgium, but as his personal property. Okay? A country the size of Western Europe, with a massive population, is given as the personal property of one man. And as you can guess, he just behaves beastly. The Free State of Congo, created to resolve the competitions between the great imperial powers, turns into a Holocaust, where Leopold II and his military force, the force publique, essentially mistreat, murder, starve to death, potentially at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Africans. And the money he takes, he uses to beautify Belgium. Okay? Between the 1880s and 1890s, the Europeans expanded and controlled most of Africa. The Ashanti Wars, the Dahomey Wars, and the Mahdist Wars. Mahdists were the first radical Islamist movement, and it started in Africa against European colonialism. All are part of this expansion. The only states that survive, the only African polities that survive are Liberia, which is essentially protected by the United States of America. Liberia is a weird place where essentially the Americans sent their slaves. The initial plan was they would sell all of the African Americans to Liberia. They gave up on that thanks to the Civil War, but they sent a lot of them, and it turned into a hellhole because guess what? The African Americans that arrived in Liberia started treating the local Africans as slaves, as second-class human beings. So you know, once you learn to be once you're treated badly by someone, chances are you're going to treat someone else badly. And Ethiopia, which manages to survive by defeating the Egyptians and Italians under emperors Johannes IV and Menelik II. In South Africa, the UK clashes with the Boers and the Zulus. So, let's go back to Bismarck over here, having a very civilized conversation with his king. If you remember the video, this is propaganda, of course. Bismarck needs to keep France isolated, okay? And to do this, he considers a German-Russian-Austrian alliance extremely important. The problem, though, is because of the Balkans, Austria and Russia are becoming more and more opposed, okay? At the same time, he's got a trouble. You see, in Germany, it's the era of romanticism and romantic nationalism and Teutonism, Teutons. And people are pretty much racists. I mean, it's the popular position to be a racist. Being not racist is the unpopular position. So all of the media people, all of the poets, the writers, the theater players, a lot of them are racist scum. Okay? And they all talk about the clash of races in Europe. And the races are the Teutonic races. Yes, good. Germanic peoples. And they go and they watch the Ring of Nibelungen by Wagner and they go like, ah, German civilization, yes, Odin, Freya, and all of that. And on the other side are the Slavs. And there's also the Latins, but no one cares about them. And in Germany, this anti-Slavic racist position is becoming more and more virulent and powerful. And this means Bismarck is facing more and more demands for Germany to do something to teach those pesky Slavs, those Poles and the Russians, the Serbs, the right race issue. So it's becoming harder and harder for him to make his stupid system work. He has to balance two countries that hate each other and a domestic opinion that hates the key country in his alliance system, Russia. And his problem is, if he was Metternich, he would just bring in the English to solve this. Unfortunately, the British are like, no, sorry, we're just reading our Sherlock Holmes stories. Yes, very good, excellent, and spending our time fighting the Woozy-Woozys down in Africa, yes, indeed. Go Gordon, I say, go Gordon. So no help there. And worst comes to worst. In 1889, Wilhelm II, grandson of Kaiser Wilhelm I, son of the poor Kaiser Frederick III that only rules for 100 days because he's got so bad throat cancer he can't speak. He literally dies because his throat cancer strangles him. He smoked a lot. They smoked a lot. They smoked a lot of cigars. They could smoke things like 10 cigars a day. So if you think you smoke a lot with your cigarettes, well, you shouldn't smoke, but you're not overdoing it. Think about that, smoking 10 to 20 cigars a day. Okay? And Wilhelm is a very young, bright, difficult child. Okay? He doesn't like being treated as a child. And Bismarck is now an old, bitter, cynical old man, so he can't resist treating him as a child. So Wilhelm has a big issue with his policies. And Wilhelm wants to change things. First of all, Wilhelm likes ships. I mean, he literally likes ships. Like, how many people in Turkey like fast cars? Or great, fast computers, or jewels, diamonds, and stuff like that? He likes ships like that. He just loves ships, it's his hobby. He loves going on ships, and he wants a big navy. He wants big battleships, just like the British have. It's the coolest toys around. They have the best technology. They have electrical generators, heating systems, pulleys, automation. It's really awesome, man. This is literally his reaction, okay? I'm not overstating it. And he wants colonies, because he wants Germany to be a world power, world power, okay? Like France and the UK. And as we're going to see, this will bring Germany into conflict with Britain, who sees itself as the guarantor of the status quo globally. Bismarck, as we said, is opposed to colonies. And a navy, what the devil are we going to do with a navy? How is the navy going to protect East Prussia from the damn Russians? or Alsace-Lorraine from the French, or Berlin from the socialists. He doesn't like Russia. He's anti-Slavic, despite the fact that the Kaiser is his cousin. Yeah, these guys are all weird. They're like racists, but they're all related. I mean, literally. They're like, you're white, you're not white. We're dumb brothers. I don't care. From the same mother. I don't care. Okay? We're dumb. He prefers supporting Austria, who has a teutonic element against Russia and the Balkans. Well, Bismarck opposes this as well, because Bismarck thinks Russia is the threat, you dumb fuck. Sorry, you didn't hear that. We have to keep the alliance with it. And finally, King Wilhelm I was a sensitive soul. When Bismarck got angry, Wilhelm I got angry. They cried, they broke things with each other, but ultimately Bismarck will get him to agree. Not Wilhelm. Wilhelm is very strong, so Bismarck cannot cry himself out of this. He cries and cries and cries, he breaks things, he threatens to resign, and Wilhelm says, well, if you want to resign, I'm wearing my uniform, feel free, old chap. And Bismarck is gone. Okay, let us take a break. Let's see how Wilhelm II deals with his plans. How does he try to implement them? Now, let's talk a bit about Kaiser Willy. Okay, and this is a nickname he uses, so you can use it as well. He wishes, as we said, to enhance the power of Germany in the world. He is too restricted by a very weird political system. The German Empire probably has one of the weirdest political systems in the history of the world. Remember, it's an empire, but technically, constitutionally, it's a federation of sovereign states. There is foreign ambassadors in Bavaria, in Baden and Württemberg, but Prussia dominates it because of weird rules about its representation in the two governmental institutions that are federal, which is the Reichstag and I don't remember the name. Was it the Landtag? Well, the way where the princes are represented. Yeah, Landtag. Thank you very much. The other weird thing is, while elections to the Reichstag are among the most democratic in Europe, in the sense that it's full suffrage for all men in Germany, elections to the local parliaments of each German state in many cases remain medieval. Indeed, in some places there is even a return from 4 democratic elections, like Hamburg, to more medieval restricted franchises. So Germany is a weird place. Furthermore, the Imperial Chancellor is at the same time the Prussian Prime Minister, just like the Emperor of Prussia is of Germany is the King of Prussia. And the Imperial Chancellor is responsible to the Emperor, not to the Reichstag. But he still needs the support of the Reichstag to get budgets through. So we're talking about a really, really weird system where essentially power is at the same time extremely diffused between actors that really can't force each other to do whatever they want, and in a way could be concentrated in 1 or 2 actors, but not, importantly, institutionally. So who gets to decide in Germany? It's not determined by the constitution, it's determined by who gets his way politically. And Bismarck is totally at fault of this because he wanted that way. Why? Because that way he maximized his flexibility. But now he's gone. And Kaiser Wilhelm II is a difficult chap. He had a pretty weird childhood. He was born with a physical deformity. One of his hands was shorter than the other, And when you're born with such a deformity in a family that has a very powerful viewpoint of military service and strength and masculinity, well, it creates certain pressures to you. It didn't help that his mother tried to fix these things by essentially doing what today we would call child abuse. Okay, if Kaiser William was alive today, they would take him away from his money. So he had this weird hate-love relationship with his mother, who was British, which has an impact. He was a high-strung person, let's put it this way. He was a very emotional and not very stable personality. He wasn't stupid by any way. He was actually an intelligent child, an intelligent person, but he never grew up, to put it simply like that. Now, he wishes to replace Russia with Britain as an ally, because he has this obsession with Britain. It's just his mommy wasn't British. He likes battleships and fleets and navies, and the British are the best in the world. He wants to emulate Britain. He wants Britain to love him, to give him the love he felt his mother didn't. Okay? He hates Russia. Russia is masculine, militarist. It reminds him of his deformity. So he wants to ally with Britain. And he believes that the way to do that is by making Germany a great power. By making it a world power. By getting colonies, essentially, and building a navy to defend it. So, immediately, he starts taking a sledgehammer to the Bismarckian system, which, to be frank, was already tottering. Russo-German relations are strained, especially by economic competition. You see, Russia is one of the premier agricultural producers of Europe. Ukraine and Poland are massive Eastern Thrace. You know, if you've gone to Eastern Thrace, to Edirne, or to Kirkilesi, or to Kirkileri, or to any of those areas, and you look at the ground, it's among the richest ground in the world. It's very black. When the ground is black, when the soil is black, it means it's very good soil. Well, take Eastern Thrace, multiply it by 100, and you get Ukraine, or Poland. So Russia exports wheat. Well, here's the problem. What's the most powerful state in the German Empire? Prussia. And Prussia is dominated by rural agricultural aristocrats, the Junkers. And, well, guess where they make their money from? Wheat exports. So they lose money the more Russia exports its wheat. So they've created a group, the Lombard Verbot, and they are essentially pushing for Germany to take a more economic nationalist policy against Russia and to restrict Russian exports into Prussia. Okay? So with Bismarck gone, the Russophobes, including the Kaiser, now have a free hand to do whatever the hell. And what they first do is they jettison the alliance with Russia. They refuse to redo it in 1890. So the German-Russian-Austrian alliance, the Drei-Kaiser-Bund, is dead. Okay? In replacement, they create the Triple Alliance between Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. Italy. Why Italy? Well, the thing is, the Italians sold themselves as enemies of France. They had colonial conflicts with France, and despite the fact that they kind of made demands on essentially the whole Adriatic coast of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they said, well, you know what, we can put that to the side for the time being and we'll all work together. Essentially, the simple reality is because the English refused to ally with the Italians, and the Italians wanted to feel as a great power, they allied with whoever was available. Germany here. Now, the problem was this. Please write in your note, what was the central element of Bismarck's foreign policy in Western Europe? What was the goal? What was the sine qua of Bismarck's policy in Western Europe. It focuses on a specific state. You know, what was Bismarck's goal for that specific state? Okay? What was he trying to do? What was his system of alliances aiming to do with that specific state? Okay? We're talking Western Europe, not Central Europe. Western Europe, in Western Europe. What was one of the main elements of Bismarck's policy in Western Europe after he unified Germany? There was a specific state. He had a policy towards that specific state. Okay? Western Europe, not Central Europe, not Eastern Europe. That state doesn't have any Slavs, except from a bunch of Polish immigrants. Okay? And Bismarck had a number of goals in his foreign policy. We talked about them in class today. One of the first ones has to do with treating a specific country in Western Europe. Big country in Western Europe, okay? He had a specific goal about that country. He preferred that country to do things outside of Europe. And what was he trying to keep that country from doing? What was he trying to keep it with his alliances with Russia and Austria? After the unifications, after the German Empire is created, not before. So this is after the end of the Franco-Prussian War. Okay? You see, the end of the Drei-Kaiser movement unravels Bismarck's policy in the West, because Russia now is not allied with anybody in Europe. Okay? Now, Bismarck believes that, Wilhelm believes that's okay, because he has the greatest idea in the world, and the idea is, I'm going to replace Russia as an ally with England. And if Germany and England are allied, Teutonic nations, who cares what the Russians do? Okay? Well, his problem with England is this. Let's take a look at British foreign policy between the 1860s and 1890s. Okay, there are 4 prime ministers that dominate this period of British policy and Sherlock Holmes stories. Okay? We have Lord Palmerston, who absolutely, fully despises Russia, hates its guts, and fought the Crimean War. Then he's replaced by Gladstone, who hates Turks a lot. And is very liberal, but free trade and stuff like that. Then he's replaced by that old Jew, as Bismarck called him, Benjamin Disraeli, who is not a Jew in religion, but his family were Christianized Jews, who builds the modern conservative party. If we have a Tory party in English politics today, it's thanks to this guy, who is then replaced by Lord Salisbury, who is a huge dude with a huge beard and another conservative politician. And despite the various competitions, especially in domestic politics between these 4 prime ministers, and especially on questions like free trade, Irish emancipation, Irish home rule, we're going to learn more about this down the way, there are 4 elements that are stable in British politics throughout this, because Britain is an institutionalized political system. Okay, prime ministers are not the all-powerful people like Bismarck. They have to work with powerful bureaucracies, the Home Office, the War Office, the India Office, and they have to work with a powerful parliament that doesn't muck around. And one of the largest parliaments, by the way, in Europe, still is one of the largest parliaments in Europe. First of all, Russophobia. Whether it is Gladstone, Disraeli, Salisbury or Palmerston, there is a spread of Russophobia in British politics that has to do with colonial, the security of its colonial empires. They don't trust the Russians. There's variations. Gladstone's anti-Turkishness sometimes tempers his anti-Russianness. The Israeli and Salisbury are sometimes willing to play around, but generally speaking, they don't want Russia to become empowered, either in Europe or in Asia. Second, all of them are pretty much fanatics of Canning, who, as I remind you, when he became the foreign minister of Britain in 1823, he said, well, now each country to itself and God for all of us. So they don't like the idea of committing to alliances in Europe. They believe that Britain should retain its independence and not commit to the security of any European state. So they pretty much reject Castlereagh's policies and thus are unwilling to participate in any attempts to regulate European affairs like Bismarck travel. 3. Frankly, as I said, it's not foreign policy that preoccupies British political elites in this era, it's internal issues. Electoral reform, increasing the number of people who can vote, the Irish Home Rule question, questions about the independence of the Anglican Church and its relationship to all of the Protestant heresies to which most other British belong. It's all about domestic politics. And finally, in colonial issues, all of them are aggressive. Even Gladstone, who kind of presents himself as an anti-colonialist because the Liberal Party presents itself, even he is an aggressive politician. When it comes to colonial protection of the empire, all British prime ministers are aggressive. And this puts a problem for Wilhelm. Yes, the United Kingdom is anti-Russian. So an anti-Russian alliance with Germany could make sense. Unfortunately, the United Kingdom is isolationist. They don't believe they need an anti-Russian alliance. Furthermore, what exactly does Germany have to offer to Britain in case of a war? No one expects Britain and Germany to fight each other in Europe. There's not going to be some great British army landing in St. Petersburg. There's not going to be some Russian army landing in England. The fight is going to be either in the Balkans, the Eastern Mediterranean, or Central Asia. It's going to be at Bukhara. It's going to be at Uzbekistan, at Afghanistan, at the hills of at the mountains of Punjab. It's going to be in the steppes of Tibet and China, and Manchuria. What the devil are the Germans going to do there? Well, Wilhelm can say, well, we can attack Russia from Europe. That doesn't help the British, because by the time that perhaps the Germans defeat Russia, it might be already too late for India. The British need allies who can put boots in the ground in Asia. Germany doesn't have that because Germany doesn't have a fleet. So guess what Wilhelm decides to do? He builds a fleet. He has a simple solution. If Britain ignores me, then I will become so powerful that Britain will become scared of me. And by scaring Britain, I will force it to ally with me. It's kind of like the guy or the girl who got rejected by the person they want, and instead of saying, okay, fine, there's other things, they get obsessed and they just start doing more and more weird, creepy things. Okay, this is it. Take a moment and understand his strategy, okay? He's going to build a big navy capable of competing with the British Navy. He's going to compete for colonies, and now in the world there are no independent states left. There are no countries to cut up beyond Ethiopia, maybe in Africa. So he has to claim colonies from France or England, which are the great colonial empires. So again, his idea is, I'm going to scare Britain so much that Britain is going to ally with me. Okay, everybody got that? Get that into your brains. I'm going to terrify you. I'm going to come and scare you so much that you want to become my best friend. Okay? Yeah. I got nothing to say. So here's what happens with Russia without an ally and France without an ally, because Bismarck's policy was to keep France isolated and without allies in Europe. Republican France, the homeland of liberty, equality, fraternity, and Tsarist Russia, the homeland of the Gulag, the Katerga, and the whip, become allies. Okay? There are economic reasons for this alliance. Russia needs capital. Russia needs money to develop its industries, its ports, and its railroads. And guess who has money? France has money from its colonial empire. So the French start pumping billions of francs into Russia, paying for railroads, and they're paying for railroads not just anywhere. No, ladies and gentlemen, they're paying for railroads that go from Moscow to Warsaw, and from Warsaw to the west. They're building a military railroad system that the Russians can use, because both Russia and France start seeing Germany as a threat. This is an important point in European history. The Franco-German and Russian alliance completely destroys the leftovers of the Vienna idea that there will not be adversarial alliances between the great powers. Until now, until this point, all the great power wars in Europe were an alliance versus a single state. Okay? There was no great coalitions facing each other. Well, now there are two great alliances facing each other. On the one hand, the Franco-Russian Entente, and on the other hand, the triple alliance of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Again, it makes so weird to say those three names together, but whatever, politics is weird. Let's see what's going on in the world. Okay, North Africa, there is extreme competition between the United Kingdom, France, and Italy over control of the Nile. This competition is serious enough that it creates sometimes warfares in Britain. And I have to be realistic to you. Until the 1900s, until 1905 roughly, the British saw France as a greater threat than Russia or Germany. France had a navy, and France was an aggressive opponent in colonies. Okay? In the Horn of Africa, there were the Mahdi Wars. Mahdi was the first Islamist fundamentalist, revolutionary, anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist movement. Before that, there had been the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia, but they had been defeated decisively by the Ottomans. Well, actually, they had been defeated by Mehmet Ali Kabali on behalf of the Ottomans. But these are new people, these are the new guys. And they fight the British and the Italians and the Ethiopians, and they're defeated in the end. But there is a new idea coming in the world, which is Islamic fundamentalism, the modern version, okay? The political ideology that guides so many political movements and violent insurgencies right now in the world. It all starts with the Mahdi, okay? The Italians try to conquer Ethiopia and are defeated at the Battle of Adwa, slapped like that. So they feel really bad because they're the least of the great powers. And the Vashoda crisis almost leads to war, but it is resolved. The important thing is here. By 1902, Britain has solved its security issues in Africa and in the Americas. In the Americas, after the Venezuelan crisis, okay, Britain essentially makes an agreement with the United States of America recognizing USA preeminence. In Africa, after the Fashoda crisis, Italy, France and Britain make an agreement about the division of Africa. In another name, Britain doesn't have, after 1902, any reasons to be distracted outside of Europe and Asia. By the way, during all of this era, Germany is trying to persuade Britain, you should ally with us by doing what? Whenever any country has any problem with Britain, the Germans take its side, the other country's side. So, are the French thinking of fighting the British over Fashoda? The Germans go to the French, yes, we want to fight the war. Are the Italians making issues in Sudan? The Germans go, yes, yes, because they think, oh, we will show Britain that it has to ally with us, because if it doesn't ally with us, we're going to punish. But Britain is like, we have the Navy, and you don't. So we'll solve this problem without you. Thank you very much for your assistance. This becomes really egregious in South Africa, okay? By this period, South Africa is essentially divided by a British colony, the Cape Colony. The Zulus have been defeated, they have been forced to submit, and two Afrikaners, Boer, that's essentially Dutch, states. The Free County of Orange and the Transvaal Republic. Well, to put it simply first, the Cecil Rhodes, who is a crazy imperialist, he hates the idea of any other white people having their own states there, and he picks up a war with the Afrikaans, the Boer War. And this lasts for a period, for a very long time, 1899 to 1902, and it's a terrible war for the British. The old British Imperial Army proves to be incompetent, like in the Crimean War, and it leads to massive changes. And it's a nasty war. If you're wondering where the idea of concentration camps comes from, I mean, the Americans used something like internment camps for the Native Americans in the 1880s, 1890s, but those were actually huge counties. The first to actually use concentration camps as a military tool, essentially to put women and children in packed conditions, were the British. Their way for defeating the Boers who used guerrilla warfare was to essentially remove the population that supported the guerrillas. And it's very successful. So they took all of the women and children, all the old people of the Boers, they moved them to concentration camps. Lots of them died from starvation and diseases, and that cut off any support for the Boer rebels, guerrillas, who had to surrender. Okay? So the British win the war, introducing to humanity a new nastiness, and they get really angry with Germany, because Wilhelm, in the Boer War, supported the Boers. Why? Because they were Dutch, they spoke not Dutch, Dutch is close to German, and because he was like, Britain, in your eye. If you don't become my friend, I'll continue doing this. So he thought that he will get a reward in the end, because he says to Britain, you know what, I could have gone to war with you, Britain, because these are German people you are mistreating. I didn't, so can we be friends? Can we be friends? Can we be friends? Instead, Britain says, yeah, no. By the way, can you stop threatening me? Really? Can you stop? It's irritating. It's creepy. Can you stop it? No, I won't. I love you. The same time, in Asia, something important is happening. Until now, most of our protagonists in this history of diplomatic relations have been European states. Okay? I mean, the Ottoman Empire is one exception to that, so it's kind of considered a European state by now. And there's the United States of America all the way in the Americas. But there's no non-European great power. Okay, Russia is weird, but it's also considered a European state. this is about to change. In China, the reform project, okay, fails. China is a huge country, and as in the case of the Ottoman Empire, there are too many oppositions for reform from the center. As a result, reform projects in China are always local. For example, Viceroy Li Hongzhang engages in creating a modern army in navy in essentially what is today the sea around Peking. Okay? So the reform project is opposed by external powers who don't want to see China becoming strong. It's opposed by local powers, the Chinese intelligentsia, the people who essentially man the bureaucratic system of China, the mandarins. They don't want reform either, because it will threaten their positions, and also it's barbaric. Okay, you're not a country that has a 5,000-year history, and you just go and say, oh look, all of this new crap from these barbarians, we have to copy them. Okay? It's not easy. And by the imperial center itself, which is worried that if a Chinese warlord like Li Hongzhang becomes too powerful, perhaps he will overthrow the imperial dynasty, which I remind you is Mongol. It's not Chinese. China is an apartheid state back then. If you're Chinese, you have restrictions to what you can do. They are ruled by a Mongol minority. On the other hand, Japan, thanks to centralization, going back to the pre-modern system of the Bakufu, is able to create a centralized modern state with modern clothes, modern music. There's a reason why the Japanese are crazy about classical European music, railways, and above all, a modern navy and a modern army. Now, as I said before the break, Japan forced Korea to open to the world, okay? That opening led to an intensification of rivalry between Japan, Russia, and China. And when I mean China, I'm essentially meaning Viceroy Li Hongzhang, who is the most powerful of the Chinese local warlords, over who will control Korea and who will manage how Korea enters into the global system, how Korea becomes modern. As you can understand, whoever manages that also gains control of Korea for the rest of what people thought will be history. This conflict leads to a war, the First Sino-Japanese War, where in 1894-1895, Japan decisively defeats China. It destroys the modern army and navy created by Li Hongzhang, and then it humiliates the pre-modern imperial armies sent against it. Korea now is Japanese. No. Russia walks into the door and says, "Niet." Japan, Korea is important for the Russians because, you see, the Russians have big stakes. They want a they want a port that's open in the winter. Most Russian ports in the winter become ice closed, so your ships stay at home and can do anything. Well, the great port of Russia in the east, Vladivostok, has that problem, but there is a port very close to there, Port Arthur, which is open all around the year, and the Russians are unwilling to accept the Japanese taking that port. So they move in, and with the support of the other great powers, they deny Japan its gains. There's also an economic interest. The whole Romanov dynasty has personal economic stakes in the Trans-Siberian Railway and the massive lumber operations in East Siberia. By the way, a lot of those stakes are cons. There's a con man who essentially takes advantage of it. But the important thing is, for personal economic reasons, the Russian royal imperial family can't let Japan control Korea. isolated and defeated diplomatically, not with war, by a coalition of great powers, including Italy, Germany, Russia, and France, the Japanese seek an ally. And they find one. Britain. For the British, the Japanese alliance makes sense. It doesn't commit them to European stability, so they can still remain isolated from Europe. And what Japan has thus proven to the world is that it has a navy and an army that are modern and capable of defeating a modern European army. Okay? And third, unlike Germany, that Japanese army now can be used in Asia. So if there is a war between Russia and Britain over the Great Game, Japan is a crucial ally with a military and a navy that can essentially outflank Russian attempts to go south. Japanese alliance with Britain makes the Japanese more willing to push for what they consider their imperialist rights. Russia disagrees, and this leads to the Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905. Everybody expects Russia to win because they're racists. It's one thing for monkeys to defeat other monkeys. That's literally the kind of wording they use. By the way, the Japanese and Chinese are also racist. If you read newspaper accounts in Japan and China done during the Japanese-Chinese war, there's nothing nice written there. But the Europeans think Russia is a European power. Of course, it's going to defeat the Yellow Peril. And one of the biggest racists of all is, of course, Kaiser Wilhelm II, who might hate Russia, but at least the Russians are white people. Well, guess what? Race has nothing to do with winning wars. Efficiency, competence, and logistics do. The Russians are defeated decisively by Japan, which leads to a revolution in Russia, the 1905 revolution. And the decisive action of this is the Battle of Tsushima, which is the largest naval battle fought in the world since Trafalgar. That's the Russian Navy, and that's Admiral Tomo of the Japanese. now considered a great power. The first non-white, in quotation marks, great power. Okay? Its victory leads it to dominate Korea, which it turns into a colony because, well, that's what civilized nations do. They colonize people and repress and exploit them, but bring them civilization. Now, the important thing here is the rise of Japan completely changes the dynamics of international politics in Asia, because now Russia, the US, UK and France must take Japanese interest and reaction to consideration. And it's really bad news for Germany, because Germany becomes even less useful. Why would the British ally with them? Now in Asia they have an ally, Japan. At the same time, immense things are happening in the Americas. Now, the United States of America was the strongest state in the American continent ever since its independence, okay? But it wasn't a great power yet. It had defeated Mexico, sure. Had its own civil war, sure, but it wasn't a country that necessarily was seen as having influence outside of America. Well, things are changing, okay? By the 1830s, the 1890s, the US is an economic colossus. Its economy is massive, easily bigger than most European economies. It has interest in East and Central, East Asia, and Central and South America. American corporations are active everywhere, including the Ottoman Empire. American cultural influence is huge. Within the Ottoman Empire, American missionaries create most of the modern schools in the East. Robert Morris College, Ozyegin University was created as an American missionary school. Okay? In China, everywhere, slowly, American power is being felt, initially just in influence. Between 1890 and 1910, it forces the United Kingdom and France to respect the Monroe Doctrine in a number of crises, and persuades the British to give America what poor Wilhelm is looking for in Europe, a special relationship. Okay? Now, Germany attempts to do some challenging. It attempts to challenge the Americans over US somewhat. Sends its little navy to challenge the Americans, but with English support the Americans beat it out. As in Asia with Japan, Britain finds a modus vivendi, a common way of life, an agreement with the Americans in the US. So, in Africa, Britain has solved all its problems. In the Americas, Britain has solved all of its problems. And in Asia, it has found an ally against Russia. Yeah, this is a good picture of the Great White Navy. This visited Istanbul as well. They sent a small navy of 12 ships to go throughout the world and visit all of the planet. And that was when America showed to the world, look, yeah, don't piss us off. We can reach you now, in a nice way. So, if you're willy, you cry. Like a good German politician of that era. Your attempt to persuade the British to ally with you is going nowhere. In Africa, the UK dominates, doesn't need a partner. In East Asia, the UK is allied with Japan. In the Americas, the UK has an understanding with the US. Where are you going to be able to show the British that they need you? There is one part of the world where the British have not been able to resolve issues and hash out an agreement with the other great powers. There's one part of the world that is still an open door for an ambitious country to change the status quo and persuade the British that they're needed. And that is the Ottoman Empire of the Balkans. Again, this is a question. Let's talk a bit about the reign of Sultan Abdul Hamid II. You can get the propaganda from the Patihat TV series if you want, okay? That presents one way of seeing things. Okay. Abdulhamid II was an absolutist monarch. He ruled by personal power, okay? He got rid of the parliament and he ruled dictatorically, but he was a smart monarch. You see, while politically he did not permit freedom, he destroyed the young Ottoman movement. He heavily restricted and persecuted the young Turkish movement, the initial movements of the peace and the progress in Union society and so on. That's why, you know, the Ittihad Betaraki starts in Paris and not in the Ottoman Empire. They were in exile. But, and he uses Islam as an ideology to legitimate his dictatorship as the Caliph. He's the first Ottoman Sultan in a very long while that actually shows interest in, let's say, Medina and Mecca. Okay? So he brings back some of those things, but mostly he permits economic freedom. Under his rule, the Ottoman Empire opens up and becomes an economic powerhouse. There's free trade. True, foreign interests dominate a lot of this trade. Within the empire, most of the economic power is in the hands of Ottoman Greeks and Armenians. Now that's great, because as long as they're becoming rich, they're not busy trying to rebel. So Abdul Hamid's rule is, I beat the crap out of you if you're trying to ask for political rights, but hey, if you want to build a huge church in the middle of Pera, be my guest. So, you know, in the future, the president of Turkey can be pissed off that the biggest religious structure you see in Pera is Ayat Riyadh first, and build a new mosque right there to hide it. Okay? He let the Greeks to build their churches, the Armenians to build their churches. As you go to all of the Greek and Armenian monuments in Istanbul, you'll see most of them were built during the reign of Abdul Hamid. Because people busy making money are not people rebelling. That said, he could not overcome the reality that the transportation network in the eastern parts of the Ottoman Empire, that Anatolia was a backwater, that he didn't really care about. Eskişehir was the furthest they cared about. So imperial power, oppressive in Rumeli and in Istanbul, was kind of irrelevant in Van and Ezgin and Diyarbakir and Antep, as it used to be known. Now it's Gaziantep, or Marash, now Kahramanmaraş and so on. And there it was all about Kurds versus Circassians versus Armenians. The Russian conquest of the Caucasus and also the Bulgarian independence created a massive movement of refugees escaping destruction and massacres done by the Christians into the Ottoman Empire. These people kind of don't like Christians, okay? Kind of understandably. So the Sultan likes to settle them in those areas of the empire where there are a lot of Christians, especially Armenians, and where there are people who are not loyal to him, especially Kurds. So you have a situation where it's like Wild West. You have Kurdish tribes fighting Circassian refugees, fighting Armenians. Some of those Armenians, they can't fight back, so they get massacred. Some of them, like in Zeytun in Cilicia, they're pretty much armed to the teeth and they fight. So it's pretty much hell on earth. And the Sultan makes a decisive decision. He takes the Kurdish side. He decides that the way to pacify Anatolia is to take the side of the militarily strongest element, those are the Kurds. So he supports the Kurds in their oppression and conflicts with Armenians. Okay? This is a survival strategy for the empire. Because at the same time that he supported the Kurds, the Russians are slowly starting to gain influence in the Kurdish tribes. That's why the first dictionary of the Kurdish language was published in Moscow. The Russian Empire was very interested in this. In reaction to the seeming bias of the Sultan for the Kurds, Armenian nationalism becomes much stronger, much more violent, and much more dependent on Russian support. The Armenian Revolutionary Federation, and one is the Khanchukhan party, and the other is the Shashkanian party. I can't speak Armenian, so don't expect me to say any of these words correctly. They become more aggressive. In reaction, Abdul Hamid permits the Kurds to massacre the Armenians in key areas of eastern Anatolia. These are the so-called Hamidian massacres of 1896. These are pretty bad, and in Western media they are presented as the bloody Sultan, and they create a joint major power reaction. Initially Russia is like, war, violent, and the British say, okay, let's not have a war, let's all of us work together to persuade the Ottomans to not kill their Armenians. So, the two of them, Austria, Britain, Russia, and Germany, go in and tell the Ottoman Empire, you have to have this kind of system in Eastern Anatolia. Abdul Hamid says yes, but of course does not implement anything, because that's a good strategy for an Ottoman Sultan. One result of this is that the Austro-English understanding in the Balkans, until then, the British were supportive of Austrian activities in the Balkans because we hate Russia, collapses. Let me see what it is. Okay. Let me give you a 10-minute break. It's okay, let's see what's going on here. Let's see the end of Ottoman ruling. And the reason why a lot of your ancestors came to Anatolia. Now, increasingly, the relationship between the great powers and the Ottoman Empire becomes more and more antagonistic. You have English and Russian competition over the question of the Straits. You have Austrian and Russian competition over influence in Serbia, Bulgaria, Armenia, and the Austrian occupation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which, by the way, the Ottomans have not recognized yet. So this is an illegal occupation. The Armenian issue and the position of the great powers, and the position of Britain on the question of Greek-Ottoman tensions and crisis, leads Abdul Hamid II to try and create more options for the Ottoman Empire. And what he does is he invites the Germans to reform the Ottoman army. Okay? This is a very important point, because this is where German influence in the Ottoman Empire starts. It was also a very bad decision by Abdul Hamid. The Germans send a certain officer, von der Goltz, who goes and teaches at the Harbiye Academy all the future young Ottoman officers who will become chiefs of staff and generals. And von der Goltz hates Abdul Hamid. So he really preaches a policy of resistance and revolution against the Sultan, because he says the Sultan is going to destroy the empire. And among the officers who get educated in the programs created by von der Goltz are Enver Pasha, Mehmet Zevket Pasha, and Mustafa Kemal Pasha, later Ataturk. This results in intense German Anglo-French competition over economics, and especially who gets to build railways. At the same time, the situation in the Balkans continues being problematic. The Greeks of Crete rebel again against the Ottoman Empire. And this leads to ethnic fighting between Greek Christians and Greek Muslims, since most of the Cretan Muslims, so if you're a Giritli Muslim, if you're Giritli, your ancestors were Greeks who became Muslims. Most of the Giritli Muslims were actually Greeks who became Muslims. So it was essentially a deep hatred between people speaking the same language but with different religions. By the way, Hussein, Ozyegin is also Girit. His family is actually from Girit. So this leads to an internecine conflict, which leads to Greek interference in active prosecution of the megali idea, the idea that the small Greek state will supplant the Ottoman Empire in the East. And this leads to a war, which is won by the Ottomans. I guess. Okay, the Sultan is happy about that, he won a war. Okay. But the great powers intervene and they force a pro-Greek Cretan resolution. So Crete remains part of the Ottoman Empire, but becomes self-ruling and autonomous, which leads some of the Muslim population to leave, so most of them still remain there. Okay? The Ottomans are very unhappy with the UK, which they consider responsible for this. Things get worse. As we're going to see in 1911, Italy attacks the Ottoman Empire, and that shows everybody its weakness. But why Italy attacks? We gotta go a bit back. By the way, the first war movie in the modern era is based on the Greek-Turkish War, and was done by Georges Méliès, the pioneer of cinema. So this is literally the first war movie ever created. The grandfather of Saving Private Ryan, or Gallipoli, or Kutahamara, and all those stuff. Very old. So it shows the Greeks retreating and the Ottomans taking a house and trying to break it down. They're dynamiting it. There will be music like you know, tension music, like Indiana Jones style, but no sound. And the brave officer dies, and this is one of the first positive depictions of an Ottoman in cinema. Let's see what's going on. Okay, wall of text. Don't worry about understanding all of this. Get the brain gist. First of all, we start with Serbia. In 1903, a bunch of Serbian officers break into the royal palace, find the king, King Alexander Obrenović, King Alexander I of Serbia, and his wife, and viciously murder them, and then throw their bodies into a fountain. Okay, and then they smoke cigars and discuss everything that happened. Serbia, as a result, becomes very anti-Austrian, because Obrenović was murdered because he was seen as too supportive of Austria. He's replaced by the Karađorđević dynasty, who are really anti-Austrian. Okay, so Serbia from pro-Austrian becomes anti-Austrian. Secondly, between 1895 and 1903, IMRO, Internal Macedonian Revolution Organization, a pro-Bulgarian Slavic Macedonian organization, begins a terrorist and guerrilla campaign in the Ottoman Balkans. Its goal is to gain autonomy for the area of Rumeli, essentially, as the first step to unifying it with Bulgaria. Okay? It reaches its peak with the Iliden Rising, which failed. But because of the Iliden Rising, a lot of Ottoman Greeks are murdered in the repression of it, which leads the Greeks to decide that they have to become active and fight against the Bulgarian-supported IMRO. So Macedonia, Rumeli, essentially becomes this massive battlefield where you have Greek guerrilla bands, Bulgarian guerrilla bands, Serbian guerrilla bands, even Romanian guerrilla bands, plus the Ottoman gendarmerie, plus Albanian armed bands, all of them fighting together, making the Wild West look very tame. Okay? This lasts until 1908. In 1908, the Young Turks, an organization that unites everybody who hates Abdulhamid II, which includes Ottoman Muslim exiles like Prince Sabaheddin or Ali Riza in Paris, but also members of the military and the bureaucracy like Talat Pasha and Ver Pasha in Edirne, plus the Armenian Revolutionary Federation, plus Imro, all of them come together and lead a revolt that forces the Sultan to accept the constitution, to reimpose the 1876 constitution. Some more things happen, and the Sultan is forced to be overthrown. And with Abdul Hamid II comes an end to the era when the Ottoman Empire is actually ruled by the Sultan. He's replaced by another brother. This is literally 5, 6 brothers until now. Mehmed V Rashad, who is, well, not very impressive in a sense. And not really important because he's not ruling anymore. The young Turks become quickly divided. Now, the good news is, with the young Turk revolution, the Greeks, the Bulgarians and the Serbians pull out their revolutionary guerrilla terrorist groups, whatever you want, you can call them, I don't care. Finance junkies, okay? In Greece, they'll hate me for saying that, okay? Because they think, okay, everything now will be resolved by elections and democracy. Hooray! Viva la Constitution! Unfortunately, the young Turks quickly divide into 2 groups. One of them is the nationalistic, pro-Muslim Committee of Union and Progress, also known as Ittihad Veteraki Cemiyeti, which is essentially led by Talat Pasha and his Edirne faction within Rumeli. On the other side, you have the Liberal Freedom and Accord Party, Hurriyet ve İttifak Fırkası, which is essentially formed by an alliance on the one hand of Ottoman Greeks, some Armenians, but mainly Prince Sabahattin, and also conservative Muslims who hate the CUP for its Western ways. These 2 groups fall against each other, and by 1912 there is a coup d'etat by the savior officers who are aligned to the Freedom and Accord Party, who overthrow what they consider an illegitimate government headed by the Committee of Union Progress. Really quickly back. As you can understand, between 1903 and 1912, the Ottoman Empire is again in a political crisis, very similar to the one in 1876. There's no stable government. Also, we're not talking about that really today. Something monumental happens in 1905, 1906 that leads the young Turks to the revolt, and that is an alliance between Russia and the United Kingdom. We're going to talk a bit later about this, but what happens is essentially, thanks to France and Britain resolving their issues in Africa, the French are able to smooth out an agreement between Russia and the United Kingdom, an entente. And at Reval, Tsar Nicholas II and the King of Britain meet together. And the young Turks believe that what they decided there was the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire. And that is why they decided to rebel in 1908. The year of the rebellion is not coincidental. It was sparked by this massive change of politics in Europe. Until now, Russia and England were like, now they are. Now, in 1911, as I said, Italy attacks the Ottoman Empire to get Libya, Tripolitania. Why? Because the Italians are, no one has given us colonies, this sucks, we are a great power, we demand stuff. So they take advantage of the competition between France and Germany for Morocco, and they essentially gain permission to attack Tripolitania. They think that the new Ottoman governments, politically unstable, are going to give up. But the Committee of Union and Progress says no. Instead it decides to fight back. And it fights back by essentially sending Fedayeen volunteers, including Mustafa Kemal, later Ataturk, and Enver Pasha, who go to Libya incognito to organize a guerrilla warfare against the Italians. But generally speaking, the Italians quickly get the upper hand in the Aegean. Their navy completely shows the weakness of the Ottoman government and of the Ottoman army. That's one of the reasons why the savior officers launched their coup d'etat. The problem is that the Italian success led the Balkan states to start and think that the great powers intend to dissolve the Ottoman Empire without asking them. So what the Balkan states do, especially Bulgaria and Serbia, with the support of Russia, they decide to take action now and change the conditions on the ground before the great powers can intervene. Okay? So Serbia and Bulgaria, who hate each other, make an alliance with the goal of conquering Macedonia and Thrace. Okay? They essentially initially want to make autonomy, but for the Bulgarians, autonomy is always the first step towards independence. That's how they see it, okay? Initially, the new Greek Prime Minister Eleftherios Venizelos considered an alliance with the Ottomans because he considered Bulgarian expansionism more dangerous than the Ottoman Empire. But the Cretan issue, the refusal of the Ottomans to let Crete go, and some stupid decisions on part of the Committee of Union and Progress governments and the initial savior officers government make Greece decide that since there's going to be a coalition war in the Balkans, like whatever we Greeks do, the Bulgarians and the Serbians are going to attack. So our choice is either we stay out of it and see the Bulgarians take all of Macedonia and massacre all of the Greeks there, or ally with the Ottomans, but the Ottomans are not willing to play along. Well, then our only third choice is we ally with the Balkan states and hope to limit their successes. So, essentially, Greece allies with Bulgaria and Serbia, and then Montenegro also joins, again with the goal of limiting Serbian success. You see, Montenegro is pro-Austrian, literally. Austria pays the money to keep the country going. And the Balkan League is created, okay? The Balkan states initially never believed they would win a major victory against the Ottoman Empire. Venizelos actually said in 1913 he expected the Ottomans to hold the line, and at most what the Balkan states would get is some border changes, Crete officially becoming part of Greece, and autonomy in Romania. That was not the case. The war was a catastrophe for the Ottoman state and a catastrophe for the Muslim populations of the Balkans. Very quickly, within the first week of the war, the Bulgarians, the Serbs, and the Greeks win decisive and massive victories over the Ottoman armies. If you want to learn more about that, Edward Eriksson wrote a book called Defeat in Detail, which does a very good job at explaining that, okay? The Bulgarians reach Istanbul. So I tell you, you take the metro bus, you go to the last stop, and you walk for about an hour, you will literally be in the middle of a battlefield. The last line before Istanbul, okay? This war was accompanied by the ethnic cleansing of Muslim populations by the Balkan states, mostly Serbians and Bulgarians. There was some minor action on the Greek side, but not as much. See, the Greeks back then, they didn't hate the Turks. They really hated the Bulgarians. The Turks, they saw like people who would adapt to the new situation. So there wasn't as much slaughtering of Muslims by the Greeks, but there was a lot by Bulgaria, and a lot by Serbia, mostly towards Albania. And this created a massive refugee flow, the Muhajirs, who were then resettled by the CUP government in Greek and Armenian areas in the Ottoman Empire, creating thus new ethnic conflict. 1913, in reaction to the news that the government is going to surrender Edirne to the Bulgarians, the CUP, the Committee of Union and Progress, Talat Pasha and Enver Pasha launched a coup d'etat, the raid on the Sublime Porte, and overthrow the government and create a one-party state, the first one-party state in history, the government of the Committee of Union of Progress after 1913. Okay? The Ottomans are forced to accept the Treaty of London, which takes away all of the Balkans from them, which they have to give to the Balkan states to decide how they're going to divide it. Well, the Balkan states can't agree how they're going to divide it. You see, Bulgaria made a mistake. Bulgaria wanted the Central Balkan region, Macedonia and Thessaloniki, Salonika, or in Bulgaria, Solun, okay? But they had placed most of their armies in Western Thrace, against Edirne and Istanbul, okay? At Çatalca, the Ottomans were able to stop the Bulgarians from taking Istanbul, okay? A very important battle, you have never heard about it. Why? Because the Committee of Union and Progress and the Ittihadis that made up a big part of the Republican governments hated the officers who had won that battle. So you're not going to learn anything about the battle that determined that Istanbul would be Turkish. This is pretty much it. If the Bulgarians had broken at Çatalca, this city would have burned to the ground. Millions of Muslims would have been forced into Anatolia. The borders would be at the Bosporus, or Russia would have taken it. But they were stopped at Çatalca. So go visit it. You're not going to see much because they're building all of it. Anyway, point being, they lose all of Rumeli, but they keep Istanbul. Well, the problem is the Bulgarian army has taken up things that Bulgarians didn't really care about, while the things that Bulgarians care about have been liberated or occupied by the Greeks and the Serbians. So Bulgaria goes to Serbia and says, hey Serbs, you know that agreement we had, now you're going to give us all of this area in the Vardar. The Serbians initially say, okay, okay. You see, the Serbians, they didn't care about Skop or Monastir. They wanted northern Albania. They wanted a port in the Adriatic. They wanted Turash. Unfortunately for them, two great powers did not want that. Austria and Italy. And Austria threatened war. So Serbia has to give up all its gains. And now the Bulgarians are coming and saying, oh, you should also give up the territory you got in the Central Balkans? No. So war happens. And the Bulgarians go to war despite Russian opposition, who says, wait, wait, wait, we'll mediate it for you. No, Tsar Ferdinand says, I was denied entering Istanbul. I will not be denied entering Thessaloniki and Monastir. They go to war with the Serbs, the Greeks, the Romanians, and then the Ottomans also come back and retake the city of Edirne without a fight, and Enver Pasha goes in and says, like, ha, ha, ha, ha, I'm the best. So now I'm going to marry one of the daughters of the Sultan or his sisters, I don't remember, because I'm the best. And Bulgaria is decisively defeated. The Bulgarians are angry over it, and they are angry at Russia because they think Russia decided to support Serbia rather than them. And as a result of it, Bulgaria gets closer to Austria-Hungary and Germany, seeking an alliance, okay, and anti-Russia. So, Bulgaria is unhappy. Austria-Hungary is very unhappy with Serbian gains. It sees Serbia as a threat. It threatens war. Russia supports Serbia. Germany blinks and does not support Austria-Hungary, forcing it to back down. Okay? So what happens is, and this is Europe in 1913, as you can see, the Balkans have started to look a bit more like the border areas. So Serbia got this part, Bulgaria got this part, Greece got this part, and Albania was created on purpose to stop the Greeks from getting this part, and the Serbians from getting this part. And Albania pretty much is not well ruled. It's Wild West, pretty much. This is the world in 1913. There are everywhere colonies. The only non-colonial states left in the world, Siam, over here, modern Thailand, Ethiopia, Liberia over here. Everything else is either a European-style state or the colony of a European state. Okay, so let me finish with this, okay? Let me finish with this, just one more minute. The attempts of Germany to scare the United Kingdom in alliance failed. But they have a result, and you know what it is? Yes, the British become scared of Germany. They become so much more scared of Germany that their Russophobia is overcome, okay? Instead, what the United Kingdom comes to a conclusion is that it has to get into a resolution, an agreement with Russia, which leads the United Kingdom to decide and group Russia through a grouping alliance. So our grouping alliances are back here. So, Russia, Britain, in order to stop the threat of Russia to the British Empire, allies with Russia and against Germany, which is a threat to the Russian Empire. So William's attempt to get the United Kingdom to group Germany ends up with Britain deciding to group Russia, which is the worst scenario you can get from Germany. Which means two dangerous things. A, for the first time since Great Britain becomes a great power, the British government is not committed to the survival of the Ottoman Empire. It is willing to discuss dissolving the empire with the Russians. Okay? And secondly, and much more importantly, for the first time in 300 years, Britain is not committed to the survival of Austria-Hungary. This is the reversal of 100 years of foreign policy, and it's going to have major consequences down the way. Okay, everybody, we'll stop here.